Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports and Our Football video, and today I'm going over my Week 16 power rankings for the 2022 NFL season. Sorry about the lighting. My lamp the cord couldn't stretch far enough in this video, so this side of my face is a little dark. But let's get right into it. Crazy week this week. First off, we have the Bears at 32. We have Houston at 31. We have the Broncos at 30. We have the Falcons at 29, and we have the Rams at 28. The Falcons are a new addition to the dumpster fire. I don't think they've been in the dumpster fire for a very long time. They've lost a considerable number of games in a row at this point. A lot of close games, a lot of tight games. I really expected more from them earlier on in the season. Marcus Mariota got injured. They've had a lot of issues. And Atlanta really looked promising towards the beginning of the season, but they have completely fallen off. The Bears have taken the 32 spot after the Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos have both had pretty solid weeks, 2 weeks in a row. Neither of them were able to get a win. Denver got a win this week against the injured Arizona Cardinals, which bumped them up. And then Houston played two very strong games the past 2 weeks against the Chiefs and the Cowboys, two of the strongest teams in the league, which bumped them up a spot. And then the Bears have continued to lose even when their offense does well. So their defense is just dragging them down, and they really haven't looked great even against some of the better teams. They did play the Eagles this week, and they had a close game, but Houston and Denver have looked a little better the last couple weeks. The Rams play tomorrow night, but they stayed at 28 because they have not played yet. Moving on to bad, we have the Arizona Cardinals at 27, the Carolina Panthers at 26, the Saints at 25, and the Colts at 24. The Cardinals are on their lowest spot, I believe, all season in the power rankings after their loss this week to the Broncos. Colt McCoy went out injured, so now they're on to their third-string quarterback, Trace McSorley. McSorley did better than Colt McCoy, honestly, in some aspects. They moved the ball more, they scored more points, but overall the Cardinals had a horrendously bad game against one of the worst teams in the league, and they've been going downhill ever since week 4 or 5 anyways, and at this point they're getting to their lowest point of the season. The Panthers are at 26. They feel like they're going up spots every week, but I don't think they actually are. This week, they did lose to the Steelers, so they kind of stayed where they were. But the whole NFC South is a mess. The whole NFC South is a mess. Tampa's 6-8. The rest of them are 5-9. The Saints got a victory this week over the Falcons to get to 5-9. And it was a solid win, but the Falcons were able to come back into it. It was one of the Saints' first wins in a few weeks. And both the Saints and the Panthers have been very inconsistent this year, hence being 5-9. But I believe the Saints have shown a little more promise overall this season than Carolina has. And I think that for next year, they're going to be potentially a very good team. The Colts are at 24 after blowing a massive lead to the Vikings, one of the biggest leads in NFL history. The fact they were able to get that lead against one of the best teams in the league is the reason why they're still at 24. I didn't fault them for losing that game just because they shouldn't have been in that game to begin with. So obviously, I didn't want to drop them in the rankings. They've had an okay season, and when Matt Ryan's been on the field, they've done well. But that was a horrendous performance, blowing out a 33-0 lead. I made a video on a recap video of the game, so if you want to check that out, you can. But yeah, that was a horrible game by the Colts in the second half. The first half was amazing, but oof. Moving on, we have can beat anyone. This category has been can beat anyone for a while, but at this point in the season, I'm not sure if Tampa can beat anyone. The Browns, I think, certainly can. Deshaun Watson has not been amazing. In his return, he's been subpar, but this week he had an okay stat line. His efficiency was low, but he had a better game this week than he has for the past couple of weeks. The Browns won 13-3 over the Ravens. A lot of that has to do with the Ravens having Tyler Huntley at quarterback, and their offenses just looked lethargic. But overall, it was a very strong win by the Browns, and the Browns are looking okay. The one reason why they're not higher is because every time I think the Browns look okay, they disappoint me over and over and over and over and over again. Every time I want to put the Browns up, they disappoint me week after week after week after week. So I'm hesitant to put them above Tampa and the Packers at this point, but if they win next week or if Tampa loses, then they'll definitely be increasing in their position. Tampa's at 22 with a loss to the Bengals. I didn't want to put them below the Browns considering the Ravens' injuries and considering the Tampa played one of the best teams in the league this week. They had a lead for a while, and then they were completely demolished in the second half, similar to the Colts game. I think they were outscored something like 31-3 or something, or 34-3. It was something crazy. They had a very strong lead at the half to begin with, so it was similar to the Vikings-Colts game, except it wasn't as dramatic of a swing. Tampa didn't have as big of a lead going into the half, but the Bengals put up pretty much the same amount of points the Vikings did in the second half. Tampa went from winning by a lot to losing by 2 scores. The Packers have not played yet this week. They play tomorrow night against the Rams. If they lose, they'll go to 23. If they win, they'll probably stay where they are. And then the Steelers are at 20 with their win this week over the Panthers. It was a solid game. There isn't really much to be said. The Panthers didn't really move much. The Steelers didn't really move much. The only thing that happened to the Steelers' placement is Tampa moved below them, I believe. I believe that's the only change from this week. And I think Jacksonville might have moved above them. Jacksonville jumped a lot of spots. I'm not sure exactly where Jacksonville was standing before this week. But, yeah, Steelers are at 20. Moving on, we have just disappointing. We have the Titans at 19, we have the Seahawks at 18, we have the Raiders at 17, and we have the Patriots at 16. I almost put the Patriots at 32 because there's no possible way that any team could ever win a game with this coaching staff on offense. Belichick is a phenomenal defensive coach, but he needs to get out of his own head with who he hires on his staff. The offensive play calling is horrendously bad. When you need your defense to get a pick six in order to have any life in your team, that's an issue. The reason why I have us above the Raiders is because the Raiders shouldn't have even been in the game because the touchdown that they got, the player was out of bounds. I forget who the player was, but they were out of bounds. And it should have been another play. And the play calling, this is the same thing that happened in the Vikings game. The bad call in the end zone by the refs, and then following the bad call in the end zone by the refs, idiotic play at either on special teams or on offense or some idiotic play. There was the Pierre Strong attacking the kicker, and then in this one it was Jacoby Myers handing Chandler Jones the ball. The Patriots have the best team out of these 4 teams. The reason why we lose games is because we make way too many stupid mistakes. And I think that is the reason why I have the Patriots have the advantage over the Raiders, the Seahawks, and the Titans. But the Patriots could be 32 because they could lose any game in the season simply on bad plays. Raiders are 17. They've been increasing in the rankings pretty much every single week. The Raiders have looked a lot better, similar to Jacksonville. They haven't been as dominant as Jacksonville has in some of their games, and some of their games have been disappointing, but they have been increasing. And overall, their season, I expect them to be 8-9. So they're 6-8 right now. They're getting pretty close to that 8-9 number that I expected from them. So they're not as disappointing as the rest of the teams here. They're just kind of in this category because they're similar in strength, I believe, to the other teams in this category. Seahawks and Titans have kind of been with each other for the last few weeks. I had high expectations for both of them around the midpoint of the season. They're both 5-2, I believe. Maybe Seattle's 4-2. And then both of them have completely fallen off. I believe both of them are on 4-game losing streaks or something of the sort. Tennessee is down to 7-7. They were 7-3. Seattle might not have been 7-3, but they might have been 7-4. Either way, both of these teams have completely fallen from grace. Tennessee should have been able to win this game against the Chargers. This was their must-win game if they wanted to continue to look like a competitor. They lost this game. They no longer look like a competitor, in my opinion. And Seattle, they lost to the Niners. Obviously, the Niners are an amazing team, but Seattle really needs a win before I can put them back into the top half of the league. Next category is, how is this a thing? We have the Jets at 15, we have the Jaguars at 14, and we have the Baltimore Ravens at 13. I have no idea how this category exists. If you told me at any point in the season, preseason, the beginning of the season, the middle of the season, or up until last week, that this category would be a thing, I would never have believed you. I would never believe that the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Ravens would be anywhere near each other in my power rankings. So, crazy that they all are. The Ravens are down at 13 because of their quarterback situation. I can't really put them a whole lot lower because with Lamar, they're obviously one of the top 10 teams. But 13, I think, is a reasonable spot with how they're playing with the current quarterback. I don't know about Lamar's injury. I'm not sure exactly how long he's going to be out. But, yeah. 14 is Jacksonville. Jacksonville has looked phenomenal the past couple of weeks. They didn't play great against the Lions, but since the Lions game, they've played fabulous. This week, they got a big win over Dallas. They won 40-34. They won on a pick six, I believe, a walk-off pick six in overtime. The fact that they were in that game is phenomenal to begin with. Never mind to get a walk-off pick six in overtime to win 40-34. Jacksonville's offense and Trevor Lawrence have had a breakout second half of the year. They could be fighting for their division as they do play Tennessee one more time this season. They're 6-8. The Titans are 7-7. So Jacksonville could very well take that division if they beat Tennessee in their matchup. And their offense is looking like next year it's going to be a pretty legitimate threat. And then the Jets are at 15. I've been hesitant to move the Jets down. I think that I've been biased towards the Jets because I don't want to look biased against them. But they've lost 3 games in a row now. I believe 4 of their last 5. I think they've lost 5 of their last 7. And they're looking like they've had a hard schedule, to be fair, but they lost to the Patriots twice, which is unacceptable considering how bad we are. And the only reason why I have them above the Patriots is because I just think that the Jets have some potential in the playoffs. I don't think any of the teams are below the Jets. I don't think the Raiders, Patriots, Titans, or Seahawks have any playoff potential at all whatsoever. I think the Jets might be able to get an upset in the playoffs if they do make the playoffs. That's why they're in this category. But they're on the down and down and down, and if they continue to lose games, they'll continue to fall. Next up, we have the island of playoff mediocrity. We have Washington at 12, we have the Dolphins at 11, we have the Chargers at 10, and we have the Giants at 9. Washington Commanders lost to the Giants this week. Pretty much in this game, they were pretty much going to stay in the same spot. Whoever lost ended up around 12, whoever won ended up around 9. Giants obviously have not been playing great up until this game, but this was a big win for them, especially for the playoff picture. They've had a lot of losses recently, similar to the Seahawks and the Titans, where they started off strong and they've kind of fallen. But this was a big win for them to get right. Washington, on the other hand, started off very poorly. They got back into it with Taylor Heineke. Taylor Heineke has brought them to the playoff positioning potentially. If they can beat the Lions in the end of the season fight, I believe they're a quarter of a game ahead of them right now. 7-6-1 versus 7-7. So Washington has some big games down the stretch in order to beat the Lions out for that spot. But it'll be a tight stretch, and Washington looks like they could be able to win some games. Dolphins are at 11, and the Chargers are at 10. The Dolphins I've had pretty high for most of the season when Tua has been in the game, but they're also on a 3-game losing streak similar to the Jets, and it's hard to have a team on a 3-game losing streak in the top 10. That's what you can't really have a team with a 3-game losing streak in the top 10. It's pretty hard. The Dolphins have had a pretty tough schedule in those 3 games. They looked pretty good against Buffalo, but they should have won the Chargers game, and they just have not looked like themselves. Chargers, on the other hand, beat the Dolphins last week. This week they beat Tennessee. The Chargers are winning games that they need to win. They're doing what they need to do to make the playoffs, and they're currently a top 10 team, even though I've been hesitant to put them in the top 10 because of their inconsistency for most of the season. Moving on, we have the Super Bowl contenders. At number 8, we have the Detroit Lions. At number 7, we have the Minnesota Vikings. And at number 6, we have the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys have fallen out of the elite for the first time in quite a while this week after losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are on the rise, but this is a game that Dallas should never lose to be an elite team. Obviously, some of the other teams in the elite have lost to upsets, but those upsets were a long time ago, and I usually emphasize more recent games. I have them above the Vikings, obviously, because of their blowout of Minnesota last week, and I didn't move the Vikings up this week, even though I kind of wanted to temporarily put them at 1 simply because of their win over the Colts in the 33-point comeback. But then I considered the fact that it was Matt Ryan, and yeah, I just kind of left them where they were. It was a good game. Kirk Cousins proved that he can win in the playoffs. I think that in my next playoff prediction video, I'll have the Vikings probably in the NFC Championship game, maybe the Super Bowl, because the Vikings really can win at any point in the game against anyone, and they've proven that throughout the season, except for the Cowboys game. But yeah, Vikings, good win. Cowboys got to bounce back next week against the Eagles. If you beat the Eagles next week, then that would be a very impressive game. Lions are at 8. Yeah, the Lions are at 8. That's how this season's going. Moving on. At number 5, we have Kansas City. At number 4, we have the Bills. At number 3, we have the Bengals. At number 2, we have the San Francisco 49ers. And at number 1, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. The Elite's been pretty similar for most of the season. The Bills just got right back into it this week at number 4 with their win over Miami. Kansas City had another rough game in a row, 2 weeks in a row. They almost lost to Denver, and then they almost lost to the Houston. It's not that they almost lost, it's the teams that they almost lost to. And I would expect any team in the Elite to... I know that Dallas lost to Jacksonville this week, and they had a poor game last week. But again, that's why they're at 6. They had 2 bad games in a row. Kansas City's had 2 bad games in a row. You can't almost lose to Houston and the Broncos 2 consecutive weeks. So yeah, they're down at 5. Bills are at 4. They also lost to the Bengals, so that hurt them. Bills are at 4. Bills also beat Kansas City. So Kansas City's lost to the Bills and the Bengals. So they beat the Niners, though, but that was before Christian McCaffrey was properly introduced to the offense. Bills are at 4. Big game for them this week against Miami. Big divisional game. I don't know if they've secured the division yet, technically, but I think it's pretty much secure unless they lose all 3 of their games. I think they need one more win for the rest of the season to secure the division. Bengals are at 3. Big win this week over Tampa. This was a big game for them. If they lost this week, then the division would still be up for grabs, but with the Lamar situation and the injury, I think that the Bengals should be able to win the division as long as they beat the Ravens. Sorry, they don't play the Ravens again. As long as they win the rest of their divisional matchups. The Bengals I underestimated the Bengals, but they've dealt very well with their tough schedule for the last 6 weeks so far. The first 3 of them, they've won all 3 of the games. So they're outperforming any of my expectations, and they're probably going to continue to for the rest of the season. 49ers are at 2, and the Eagles are at 1. The Eagles had a tight game against the Bears this week. I expected it to be tight. The Bears put up a lot of points every week, although the Eagles had a commanding lead for the most of the game. It was only a 5-point game at the very end in garbage time, but the Eagles had a pretty commanding lead most of the game. David Montgomery had a great game. The Bears, Justin Fields had a great game, but the defense really just can't do anything for them. And then the Niners beat the Seahawks. Divisional game. I forget if it was in San Francisco or Seattle, but it was a tight divisional game. Good game by the 49ers. Good win. It wasn't anything flashy or anything. They didn't have the biggest one in the world, but there were 2 last week that won a divisional game this week, so I think it's pretty fair to keep them at the same spot. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace. Huge shout out to Quinn Lacey for supporting the channel with a channel membership.